Hey, everybody. I'm going to be sharing what we did this morning with the staff. And it's basically the first part of the forward facing freedom part of the presentation that I did, more of a workshop, not presentation. A lot of sharing. It was great, rich shares. But what I'm going to give you the opportunity to do is that if you can get together with a small group of people, it's going to be a lot better experience than if you're alone. But if you're alone, that's all you can do. That's totally fine as well. I'll try to make it as interactive as possible, even if you're alone, you and me. So, um, this is the contents on the second page. We're going to be going over part one, the problem for caregivers, setting the stage. Part one, problem for caregivers, defining the health issues. Part one, the problem for caregivers, analyzing my results and symptoms. And then we're going to begin going into the problem for caregivers and forward facing tools for hope as a turnaround on the next clip. So we're going to be going up to page 11 pretty much, and then we'll start at page 12 on this here in the next video. So essentially, I'll back up a little bit and we'll talk about healing the past, transforming the present, a future on purpose. That's Forward Facing's logo. I learned it and applied it to my life, and I gained a lot for it. And that's what gives me a passion to share it with professional caregivers, caregivers at home, you name it. It's helped out in a lot of different areas of my life. So I'm going to start with the story, actually with the authors. So this is Eric Gentry. He originated Forward Facing itself. He trademarked it. It's a formula of self-regulation and intentionality. And combining those two things, and I've experienced it, it's a life-changing process if you dig in. Eric Gentry, ACE score, if you're familiar with ACE scores, we'll get into that in a bit. But ACE score of 9 out of 10, a lot of traumatic stress. That's what and some of you might be in this kind of boat. You've experienced a lot of things and you want to help kids. A lot of us do that. We go into a field where we feel passionate. We want to help people. And sometimes the issue is we have such a passion. We get so over involved and into an internalized stress because it's not turning out how we dreamed it would have in school, or our own personal stress is getting in the way, and we begin to lose that dream. We get crusty, very protective, very frustrated, you name it, we get there. So this is a great resource because it started in Professional Resilience. The first, well, I guess his second book, but the first application of the book within a professional setting. Is called Forward Facing Professional Resilience. But we're going to talk about forward facing freedom in this because this is what I was personally trained in and allowed to teach. But I am going to share with you some documents that also have to do with professional resilience. And we'll probably talk about a lot of that as well because it applies both in our personal lives and our professional lives. So this is Dr. Gentry. I began talking about him one time. I was at Moncton High School in front of a bunch of teachers, like 40 teachers. Started to cry. One of my friends said that was genius, but I said, it's just this man has made such a difference for me. Here I go again. That I am so grateful that I cry whenever I see him. So here I am crying in a video by myself in an office, but that's okay. Regulating through that. So Dr. Eric Gentry, he's a humble, passionate man. He's very he's a part of 12-step programming as well himself for himself. It's always very peer driven, and so that's kind of how he drives forward facing. And I'll read a little bit about that in the top here. Forward facing is an idea and something we can practice. The idea is you don't have to go back into what happened in the past to get unstuck today. You might find it helpful to work with a counselor or a therapist, but you can practice forward facing with trained coaches. I'm a trained coach in forward facing, and your family. And you can also do it with your friends, with peers. And that's why I encourage people to get together when they do this work, because it's the conversations that are really important, not just the content. So if you're having conversations with other people, even if you do it alone, and then you come back and you talk about it with people, it's the conversations you have and the shared experiences as you're regulating and finding intentionality that are going to be the healing part. Because this process that we're going to engage in, it not only reduces stress in the moment, allows you to have compassion, satisfaction, reduces burnout, reduces secondary traumatic stress, as well as traumatic stress for yourself. Um, I call it co-regulation because it also helps people around you. As you present yourself in a regulated way, a compassionate way to other people around you, you're actually becoming part of a solution. Because part of the problem with stress is you can get it from people around you who are also stressed out. But as you present yourself with tools that you use, even if you don't tell people the tools that you're using, your very calm presence will be a healing factor in reducing other people's traumatic stress. And that's why co-regulation is what I called this, because you're working with a lot of people with high levels of traumatic stress in their lives. Jenny Brackman was my first coach in forward facing. So I worked on the teachings of Eric Gentry. I didn't meet him at first. I met Jenny first. And she's someone who also has a high level of ACE. I think her ACE score is quite high. And she shared with me during our coaching sessions some of the things that were really, really important for me moving forward and coming back to. And because I quit forward facing a couple of times, because I got in this space where I was like stressed out while I was doing it, because that's part of my stress is learning something new, and it's so important. And I'm learning it with my shoulders up in my ears, and I'm like, I gotta remember this. And so if you're doing that as you're taking this training, let's take a minute right now, just like she did for me. Scan your body, look for tight muscles, and let's take 10 seconds. Just scan up and down. Eric Gentry calls this the wet noodle. I don't call it that in front of young teenagers or some of the ones that are in the center at Youth Quest because I know what they're going to say. I call it the jellyfish with bones around people who can't handle the wet noodle. Maybe that's some of you. I don't know. I know some of you out there are probably making fun of me, and that's okay. But the wet noodle is basically a body scan. In a noodle, when it's cooked, there's no rigidity left. So when you're feeling stiffness, tension in your body, scan up and down. I'll count from 10 to 1 and just locate tight muscles and just loosen them. It's really simple. And with each second that passes, just loosen one more or feel it kind of pulse through your body, your awareness pulse through your body, and just provide more and more relaxation. So let's go from 10, scanning from top to bottom, bottom to top, loosening the muscles. I just felt my shoulders go down. 9, 8, 7, 6, eyes open or closed, it doesn't matter. Forgot my count. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Take note, feel into your body, feel how much more relaxed you are right now. I actually felt I don't operate well in front of screens, and I just felt myself, my face relaxed a bit around my eyes. My shoulders are much more relaxed right now. As I'm continuing to think about it, my lower body is relaxing, my legs, because with fight or flight, your legs start to build up tension. They're ready to go. And let's keep going. We're going to talk about Ross Greene as well and his problem solving, but we're not going to do that today. Not going to introduce him until we hit the last third of this chapter. So this is my personal history with Forward Facing Freedom. So I began looking into Forward Facing Institute after taking certification trainings online in different modalities of therapy for the treatment of trauma in children and adolescents. I was in the drop-in center called Youth Quest that I was counseling in as a volunteer for Atlantic Wellness. This was back in 2014, 15, 16, all the way up to 19. Maybe I started in 16, but anyway, with Daniel Whalen. So that's not, I don't need to explain the center to you. Well, I guess the Atlantic Wellness Not-for-Profit Center providing free therapy for students ages 12 to 21. That was when I first became a counselor. So I first started working or doing my internship at Atlantic Wellness in 2014, 10 years ago. Wow. Collectively, my colleagues and community partners that I experienced and I had experienced several losses. And I was in denial that I needed help coping with this traumatic stress. Over time, I began experiencing a surge of impulsive behaviors, intrusive thoughts, suicidal ideation, and symptoms of anxiety and depression. And I hid these very well in my professional life by dissociating from the symptoms in the workplace and at home. I was eventually emotionally and physically exhausted. I had very little to no patience for fatherhood and partnering with my spouse. I'm grateful for several things that took place during this period of denial. My partner insisted that we get support from a marriage counselor. I found a 12-step fellowship for my impulsive and compulsive behaviors. And I began watching Eric Gentry teach courses on 21st century approaches to traumatic stress. The increased connection with my partner, the vulnerability of the 12-step group members, and the content from the training began to fill me with compassion for the students I worked with. And most importantly, I became compassionate toward myself. I was personally touched by the passion and vulnerability Eric and Jenny, my forward-facing mentors, brought to meetings and to their writing. I became certified, and now I teach this as well. So I'm a certified consultant and coach for health and wellness with forward-facing. Over the past 4 years of practicing and sharing forward-facing practices, I have further developed the strategies needed to make repairs when ruptures in my relationship with others occur. That's both personally and professionally. Increasingly, I'm also able to find safety and belonging in my body. I hope you enjoy and benefit from this presentation as you embed helpful tools in your professional and personal practices. I'm going to do this one when I do the third video. So stay tuned. So part one, problem for caregivers. We're just going to set the stage here. Viktor Frankl, it's actually debated whether or not he wrote this quote. It is attributed to him in some writings, but people haven't found it in his books. So regardless, it's a very good quote. It is attributed to him on the internet. So where could we go wrong? One that's not in this presentation, but that I really did appreciate from his book called A Man's Search for Meaning is one that he was inspired by one of his fellow prisoners in Auschwitz. And he was a prisoner in Auschwitz. He survived. He saw people die from a lack of hope. And he, through just seeing positive things happening in terrible circumstances, he was invigorated with a story he wanted to get out to the world. And in one of his really great quotes is, everything can be taken from someone, but one thing, and that is the ability to choose the attitude with which we respond. And in our attitude, in the choice that we make to face a certain circumstance with a certain, I'm going way off the quote, but I'm doing it by memory. That choice is the last of the human freedoms. If everything else is taken, nobody can take your choice to make meaning out of any situation that happens to you. And he saw a fellow prisoner pass a piece of bread to another prisoner across from him. And he said, "You take this, you need this." And that act of love truly inspired him. It was selfless. It was in a situation where it would be very justified to just hoard everything that you had because you didn't have anything really. And a crust of bread passed to another person really drove that home to him, that nobody can take that away from that person. His entire circumstances were controlled by the attitude that he had of love toward his fellow prisoner to pass that crust of bread over. and perhaps that was his last crust of bread. They never knew. They couldn't dehumanize him in that way. And that was very valuable. So between stimulus and response, this is the actual quote, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And Viktor Frankl was described by Eric Gentry, the writer of this book of Forward Facing Freedom. He said, Viktor Frankl was the father that I never had. He gave me hope in a circumstance and many circumstances that I never thought I could have hope in. And so that was very valuable to him. So a lot of his work comes back to Viktor Frankl and a bunch of other great writers that inspired him later on in life as well. But this is the one he found when he was a teenager